Okay, welcome members. We're live on the webcast now, so welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. Can we just start by introducing ourselves? So I'm Harpreet, I'm the chair of the Scrutiny panel.
Sheila Dykes, the Governance Officer.
Chris Friend, Co-optee. Councillor Eastwood from Linley Ward.
Andrew Bird, Co-optee.
Martin Bolt, Murfield.
Rob Dolby from Kirklees, Green Space.
Okay, thank you very much, members. So we'll just go through the agenda. We've got minutes of the previous meeting. Can someone agree that they're a correct record? Yeah, seconded by Chris, yeah? Is that okay? Great stuff. Is there any issues that anyone wants to raise from the minutes? No? Great stuff. Interest. Does any members have any interests that they need to declare before the meeting? No? Okay, if anyone does have anything or they have any questions, please just let Sheila know, and there's a form to fill in as well, okay? So the meeting is open to the public, and we're live on a webcast as well. We don't have any deputations or petitions for the meeting. Public question time. We are open to questions from the public, but we don't have any members of the public here today to ask questions. Yes, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Not sure, it's not on the agenda. Do we take apologies if members, because I understand that Councillor Taylor has submitted apologies because he's been called away to help an elderly constituent, but we don't have it on the agenda as such, so if we could just note his apologies, please.
Yeah, we've also received apologies from Ailey Ogden, the co-optee as well. Sorry.
Thanks, mate. We'll add apologies to the agenda as well. Thanks for that. We've also just been joined by Laurie Hunter. Welcome. Thank you very much. We are focusing today on waste-related issues. Welcome. One of our panel members, Yusra, is here as well. Welcome, Yusra. No problem. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So we're focusing on waste-related issues today, and we'll be looking at 4 issues: the ward squads, fly tipping, household waste recycling centres and bulky waste collection. Given we've got 4 topics, we'll try and spend about 30 minutes on each, and we'll ask presentations to be kept short as well, so we can go through each topic. So I think we're having a few problems with the system today, but we'll keep cracking on. Laurie, how do you want to do this? Do you want to take each at a time?
I'll say so.
Yeah? Okay. So we're going to start with the ward squads. So is that all right if I pass on to the 2 of you, to Rob? Yeah? Okay. And then we'll get questions in after you've introduced it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Right, we've a bit of a presentation around ward squads, which sets out where we are with them at present, kind of some of the successes and some of the potential concerns or issues that might need to be addressed. I do have some stats if you want to drill down into it, but don't ask me too many difficult questions on those. And then open for questions if that's okay. So the concept behind the ward squads was to ensure that we worked positively with ward councillors. We provide opportunity for ward councillors to put forward any particular environmental concerns and issues they might have, and that wards would get 2 weeks of work. So you would get what's upon us known as a hot week and a cold week, or a winter week and a summer week, as they would deliver different issues. So we've got a breakdown of the jobs per ward. I don't know if you can see that. I can just about make it out if I squint. But the idea is that ward councillors met with members of the team prior to the actual week, went through a list of jobs that they might have. Those jobs would then be subject to an element of triage, which would then give the ward a week's worth of work. That week's worth of work would be delivered, so they might not necessarily be able to capture all of what was going to be done, but there would be a capacity that would deliver that. and there will be opportunity for ward members if they wish to become involved, and equally there would be opportunities if there was any chance to get volunteers involved or to get some longevity behind it, so that post any bringing to an even point or a clean point, that then communities could potentially take over. So that was the concept behind it. We'll do some before and after photographs. So you can see this is, I'm assuming it's displayed up there as well. Yeah, so you can see this is the kind of work that's generally been done. It's normally been around the environment, things like clearance of waste, removal of long-term detritus on ginnels and alleyways, cutting back of vegetation, cleaning of roadside signs. So it's picking up some of the cyclical work that previously potentially the council may have done, but now no longer has capacity to do. So it's delivering that. But it's also intended to be an opportunity for any longer term project work to be picked up. So if there are things that councillors have a particular concern about, they could then focus the squad at that. They could have a week's intensive work. There's some volunteer coordinators across the council as well, and the VCS teams. So working in conjunction with them as well. So if there are any opportunities for that, then it doesn't necessarily have to be a whole series of small scale jobs. It can be one large scale blitz on a particular area. And we've also taken the last year to upskill the team a little bit. So things that previously we weren't able to do, like removal of waste from steep slopes, they're getting rope access training, so they'll be able to actually safely access it. That's one of the things we've never been able to do before because of the level of hazard. They're also getting water training, so they'll be able to access water courses safely, be able to go in there. Not deep running water, but certainly, you know, modestly flowing, modestly deep water, whatever modest might mean, to be able to go and clear waste from that. So they are being upskilled in a whole portfolio of different ways that they can support the environment. So that's our progress to date. That's the number of jobs that we've done in wards so far during the summer. The summer isn't quite over yet. The leaves have changed colour, but the summer, as far as we're concerned, hasn't changed yet. So that is still ongoing. And then there'll be a winter programme which will be published very soon to enable people to be able to get that. This is just requests per number of ward, and then the kind of differences between summer and winter ward work, and I've covered that off really. So I think there have been some defined successes. The first one is that the team actually exists. It didn't exist and now it exists. I think that should be seen as a success. The fact that we've managed to upskill the team, and there is a genuine sense within the guys who do this, that they are very keen on this, they want to do it, it gives them a sense of achievement when they do it. And the more that they can do, then the better it is. Things like working from the Red Book, so highways working, they're being upskilled on that as well. We're looking at increasing the range of tools they have access to, so again, it just gives them a broader palette of skills to be able to deliver things. Better join up working with services. I think that they have had a significant level of success in breaking down some of the silos that traditionally have been there. I think that's certainly down to personalities, but also because people know that these jobs are supportive right across the piece, so that's been really good. And delivery of third-party involvement. So we have involved other organisations, we've involved people like the National Trust as well, so it has been quite successful in that. In terms of the jobs that have come through, again, I think that has been a success. So long-term problematic prows, there have been routes and ginnels that have been not necessarily been as accessible as they should have been. This has given opportunity to be able to address some of those. Clearance of waste, long-term grot spots that have just fallen literally or metaphorically between the cracks, they've been picked up as well. And a whole mass of environmental improvements. And one of the successes for me personally, I think, or I regard as a great success for the team, is better working relationships with councillors. So I think there has been a bit of a gap formed. I think that's being closed again. When the Rangers team was originally set up a long time ago now, then the idea was that there was a very close relationship between the Rangers and the councillors. That was a go-to person. Unfortunately, that fell away just because there wasn't capacity, and this really is starting to close that gap again. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I certainly think it's moving towards that place. There are some concerns, I think, from my side, and I'm sure that the panel members may or may not voice any, I don't know. Originally, it was 2+1 per ward. That's been increased to 4 just because of the need for uptake. That does mean it's not a sustainable solution. Maths will tell you if you've got 23 wards and you do it twice a year and you have pre-election period and holidays and everything else, that actually comes to more than 52, unfortunately. So there will be a need to reset that slightly at some point, and a bit of a discussion about how we do that. And that's predominantly that there has been such a successful uptake of it that actually there isn't enough capacity to deliver everything that's wanted. And that leads on, I think, to the other concern, which is members' expectations around delivery. It's not a bad thing, but it can sometimes be a slightly difficult conversation around, we want all of this, well, I'm afraid there isn't the capacity to deliver all of that. And then I think righteously as well, there has been a concern about communication. Some of the communications became a little muddled, I think, that it was not necessarily the ward squad who would be doing it. So at the start of this, there were some other services that were involved and engaged in it. Those communication pathways weren't made explicit to everybody. I think they have generally been cleaned up, but I certainly don't think it's perfect yet, but it's certainly heading on that way. And then schedule planning, for me, it's again making sure that everybody is aware of what the schedules are, that members are able to come out, have those conversations, because without the members being there to have those conversations, it's very difficult to deliver what members want. So I think it's really important. So there might be a need to push that conversation a bit earlier in the process, possibly, to enable people to have those discussions. So that's kind of the concerns. I think that's probably it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it from me.
Okay, members, questions? Richard.
It's always a bit stressful, isn't it? Okay, yeah. Well, just a quick. First of all, I agree with you. Actually, I think the communications with the councillors was very good. I thought you've got a good system, and plenty of opportunity to input. So that's good. The only question I would ask really is, could you just outline in a bit more detail how we kind of reach out and publicise this to residents, because I actually think a lot of residents don't know that we're doing these blitzes, and it's kind of a really good news story anyway. It's a good thing, and I just think, if it was more widely known, then we could build up over the period, because as you say, it's winter and summer, but we could build up a log of requests from the public. Now, some of those might be unrealistic requests, but nevertheless, that would be a potential. What kind of mechanism? Presumably something online, but I don't know. Anyway, just to ask your thoughts about how we could kind of do that, really. Thank you.
Right, that is a good political answer. It's a very good question. The way it was originally set up was the idea was that this was something for councillors to be able to do. So almost your wards, the ecology of your residents. So you would be the best conduit to be able to reach out to them and have those discussions, because one size won't fit all. Communities are different. Some people will be very tuned into online. Some people won't. Different pockets of different communities will have different communication mechanisms. But I think that, for me, it would be interesting to have the conversations as part of the ward squad conversation over the winter, to say, actually, how could we support you with that? So almost reflect it back at you and say, what would you want? Do you want some kind of online portal? Would that work for Cleckheaton, but it wouldn't work for Murfield or whatever it might be? Would you want us to do something in local papers? How would you like us to publicise it to be able to get that? I mean, there is good inputs into the VCS services, so that's Community Plus and so on. So they've already got that, and they are pushing the message out there. And my volunteer coordinators are very similar sort of thing. They're pushing the message out there. So I think that there is some of it, but we could probably do it better. But I think, again, it's kind of, how would you like us to do it?
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Rob, for the presentation. Just picking up on Richard's point, we had the ward visit recently. I think it'd be useful if possibly either before the officers come out to the ward or when they come out, if they brought forward a summary of complaints that have come in to the council. I mean, we used to have Ross and things like that for reporting street scenes. So if we got that, the public have reported these directly, linked in with the intelligence that members have got, members can then prioritise. So again, the communications thing, and probably either a bit of clarity or understanding, because as you said, there's a week's work of work. We prioritise some work in Murfield, and take it out and show you some of it. Oh, we haven't been able to do that because of X, Y, Z. Well, that means that technically we are in credit then, because if they haven't used a week's worth of work, we could have given them, we gave work sufficient for that. And as with all council things, when they take things on, if members had a time scale when it will be delivered by, we've given them these jobs, okay, we'll come back to you and say when they're going to be, so we can report back to the public and say that grot spot down your street has been reported and will be done. It saves everybody coming back. And interested that in some areas, bigger projects have been taken on board, and that's something again that reflecting on, we did put forward a couple of big projects in Murfield, but unfortunately they weren't completed. So those are probably specific, reflecting on the report, but with specific examples from our own, that it's interesting to see how they've been done. Interesting also to compare the difference between the summer and winter work in terms of ward engagement. I'm sure we'll look at that as it goes further forward. The summer ward, we've got 12 ward that have had work done. So presumably there's 12 weeks worth of work that's been budgeted and allocated for, that those wards who have already identified could probably draw down on and say, well, we're being proactive with you. Can we have the time from those wards who haven't submitted anything? I could say that, you couldn't possibly comment, Rob.
I couldn't possibly comment, Councillor, on that one. But in terms of your earlier points, I absolutely agree. I think that's a really good idea, and we'll make that happen. To be able to give you an overview of what the potential issues or the potential reported issues in your ward, and I think there'll be some self stuff that we've picked up on as well. So to give you the kind of the full picture of the intelligence of your ward, I think that's a really good idea. So thank you for that.
Hi. Just one or two little things. It is good to see that progress is being made, and that the abilities of the teams are being expanded, in particular those for steep bankings and things like that, because quite a lot of area around the borough is quite steep. I'd just like to say, it says delivery of team. It'd just be useful to know how big a team is the team. And for those who I've not been on this particular committee for very long, so to clarify what the Red Book is. Yeah. And obviously delivery and response times, so, how quickly from being reported to being inspected to be done and completed. That would be, if there is a guide for that. Thanks.
Okay, so let's take the Red Book first. The Red Book is the Highways Manual for working on the highway. So it's chapter 8 roadworks. It's called Chapter 8 because it's Chapter 8 in the big book about how you work on the highway. And the Red Book is the summation of that. So if you're doing physical works on the highway, the Red Book sets out about signing and guarding, about when you need to put traffic lights and traffic control on. So it's about keeping safe on the highway. In terms of the squad, the team sit inside the Green Space Action Team. So they are 7 enforcement and 11 rangers, but the actual team itself that deliver this is 4 plus 1 supervisor. So the original concept was it would be two rangers plus an apprentice per visit. That's been expanded to 4. So which is my point around the maths not quite working out. That deliver that. In terms of response times, this isn't a responsive team. This is a cyclical team, so that you have a time slot, and the expectation is that the works are pre-scheduled. They will go in for that week and deliver that. In relation to general responsiveness, I think it really does depend on the issue. If it is a dangerous or hazardous fly tipping, we would expect to deal with that probably within 24 to 48 hours. If it's delivering a significant risk to human health or the environment. If it's something less hazardous or less urgent, then obviously the response times would be longer in relation to it. So response times tend to be risk-based.
Forgot. Still not quite in the habit. Yeah, I was particularly interested in the volunteer groups you've come across. Were there many of them? Were they across majority of wards or just occasional? And the other part of the question is, I mean, if you can get these volunteer groups, can they work independently from your HIT team? And what can they do? Because I certainly, listening to you talking about the Red Book there, I think there may be certain things they shouldn't be tackling because they could be hazardous. But I think volunteers can make up a lot of the shortfall given the size of your team, potentially.
I'll answer the question slightly collaterally, if I may. So, in terms of actual volunteer activity within the ward squads, I don't know the answer to that. I think there hasn't been a great deal. We work with about 110, in green space, about 110 volunteers. We work in conjunction with an organisation called Natural Kirklees. So we provide free insurance. They provide a peer-to-peer sharing website, and we also provide free tools for people. So volunteers can do a great deal. They tend to be either issue focused or site focused. So if it is a site or an issue that volunteers are interested in, or community or people are interested in, then you will get take up on it. If it is more general work, then that's more likely to be CSR type work. So businesses putting things back into the community. So for that kind of thing. So we come in to work with McDonald's, we work with some other organisations that deliver that. In terms of what they can do, it's very much governed by risk assessment and training. So we provide support for hazard analysis and risk management, and we also provide training for things like strimmers and so on. We're very uncomfortable with chainsaws. Chainsaws are a very bad thing for volunteer groups to use, but strimmers are less so. So, and yes, they can work independently from us. What we tend to do for sites is that we have a site-based management plan. They'll work with a volunteer coordinator on that site. They will express what their wishes are that they wish to do on that particular site, what their aspirations and goals are. We will then work with them to develop a mechanism to do that. So looking at the work scheduling, looking at what the individual tasks might be. We'll also support them in things like social media management. So if they want to create a Facebook page or whatever to get stuff in. But once we are comfortable that they are doing things safely and they're doing things that are, and I mean appropriate not by what we want, but it's right for the site. So you wouldn't want to put an ocean in the middle of a desert, for instance. It's doing the right thing for that particular site. Then volunteer groups tend to run themselves. So we will come in and make sure everything's okay and provide any support and funding mechanisms, but they tend to run themselves.
Okay, I think I've got Richard coming in. Just to say, we're going to have to move on to the next topic soon. So I think it's
it's kind of building on what Chris said, really, because as you probably know, Rob, there's a massive demand in schools and colleges for work placement opportunities and volunteering opportunities, and increasingly students are doing Duke of Edinburgh, which includes a component where they have to actually do public works or for the public good. And it just seems, when you think of our broader mission as a council, this could be a potential opportunity actually to reach out to the schools, because it's such a ward-based activity. And at least ask them whether there are vacancies for senior people who might do it, and speaking as someone who did I had a garden bin as well, I completely agree about the chainsaws. Don't let anyone near chainsaws. That's my advice. So yeah, that's. But I think that could well be worth pursuing actually.
Yes, thank you. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I just want to ask one quick question as well. Be interested to know what evaluation that you might be carrying out on this project, say how effective it is. Because one of the things that I've been out with a team when they came to Ashbroward, I was doing a bit of I wasn't fly tipping, I was cleaning up the fly tipping, I should say. That wouldn't be great, would it, really? But the excellent team, and I can see that they love doing it as well. And they picked up, in my word, they picked up a lot of used needles as well, you know. So very crucial what they were doing. But one of your colleagues mentioned, one of my colleagues also mentioned that what they're having to do is put some of the ROS care requests on hold whilst they do this work. So it's just understanding that perhaps some of those complaints from residents might have to be delayed because of the work that they're doing for us in the summer, because there is a lot of wards to cover, isn't there? So perhaps some of what Martin was saying before might be an interesting thing actually to bring some of those into the wards as well. So just any thoughts that you have on that?
So in terms of evaluation, it's fairly basic. We have sent out a bit of a questionnaire, I think, last time, asking ward councillors how they felt it's gone. So we picked up on that. At the end of this sort of tranche of it, we'll be looking at what work has been done, making sure we've got the appropriate skills to deliver that. And there will be a discussion about capacity and whether how that can best be met. It is overall quite a small team. They have a large workload to deliver because they are one of the few non-cyclical sort of outward-facing teams. Mm-hmm. So it's balancing those two opposing needs really. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think Councillor Bolt's point about bringing in the ROS requests and all the sort of SMAR requests and everything else, so you've got a full picture and understanding would be a really good thing. So yeah, absolutely. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate, Rob, and please do give our thanks back to the teams that come out. They're absolutely excellent, so thanks for that. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to fly tipping, a very important subject. Oh, lorries, I think we're going to keep Rob. We're keeping Rob in the room. Yeah, so if we move on to fly tipping then, a short presentation again, then we'll go to members, okay? Thank you.
Okay, I didn't. So I think it's a tiny bit of a lesson first. What actually is fly tipping, and it has got a very specific definition in law. Section 33 of the Environment Protection Act. It's a deposition of waste on land where there is not a waste management licence in force. It's as simple as that. So you put anything on a piece of ground where there isn't a waste management licence, you are illegally placing waste, which is colloquially known as fly tipping, and that is anything. So it can be grass clippings, it can be an engine block, it can be spent plutonium, if you're that way inclined. So it's anything. There are a number of ways of dealing with the offence of fly tipping. So if it is a small amount, we now have, or there is legally, the ability to issue a fixed penalty for it, which is £400, which we drop down to, I think it's 180 or 200, I can't quite remember which, if you pay early. If it's larger than that, then we would look to prosecute you. Prosecution is up to £50,000 and or 6 months imprisonment and or other sentences in the magistrate's court. If it is elected to go to Crown, then it is up to 5 years and an unlimited fine. It is a serious offence. It is a genuinely serious offence. And we have had a number of cases recently in court where we have had the magistrates have viewed it seriously and have produced some significant punitive measures. Things like we've had vehicles crushed, we've had people put on tags, we've had people curfewed, we've had fines up to a summation of fines up to £10,000. This is a serious offence. So in terms of what tends to be dumped, you can read this for yourself, but household waste, 47%. Black bags, which is probably a subset of that, 13%, 14% white goods, construction waste, 14%, and other 11%. In terms of who actually does it, then it's probably mostly, there'll be a mixture between householders and commercial tipping, but a lot of the commercial tipping will be people who are, and I'd describe them as opportunistic fly tippers. So they'll go around with a vehicle, they will collect waste for 20 quid from somebody who is potentially unaware that that is an offence. Because if you give your waste to a third party, and that third party is not a registered waste carrier, you are then committing an offence under Section 34 of the EPA, which also carries punitive penalties. And then that unauthorised waste carrier, or someone who is not going to dispose of the waste legitimately, will then go and dump it. Your evidence is contained within that waste, so, you know, your details are there, it's tracked back to you, and if you can't say who you gave it to because you've just given them 20 quid, and unfortunately it's you who will be bearing the consequences of that. So it's not necessarily a good thing. So the Green Space Action Team, I mentioned before, have got seven enforcement guys, and part of their role is dealing with waste-related issues. So we investigate waste complaints on all land within Kirklees. The only way that you can place waste on land is either if you own that land and you've placed it there for a short period of time, and it's a small amount. We're not talking about illegal transfer stations, but you know, you've put your bin bags at the end of your drive or whatever, but it's on your land. Everywhere else, if you place waste on land without a waste management, blah, 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 it is an offence, and we investigate that. And predominantly we would investigate it either if there is material evidence within the waste that links it to a person or a business, or there is a witness. So the witness would need to come forward, and we need some means of tracing that. Preferably, you know, normally it's a vehicle registration number, a VRN, unless that person is known to them. Equally, if there is waste on land and that waste is causing a detriment to the local amenity, then we can serve notice on the landowner requiring them to clear it. There is a process around this, but if that isn't, the landowner doesn't clear the waste, then eventually it ends up as a criminal offence, because we serve notice, they don't serve it, we serve an FPN, they don't pay the FPN, it goes to court, and we can recover the money from that. So the Green Space Action Team, says, yeah, they take statements. So yeah, they go out, it's a criminal offence, they will take statements under PACE, they will follow that through, and they will investigate, and eventually it will probably end up in court. Do you want to do this bit one? I'll carry on then. Right, so in terms of responsibility for clearance, there is a piece of work going on at the moment looking at, does this need to be clarified around who actually does it? But at the moment, basically land can fall within three types within Kirklees, I guess. It's either owned by the council, it's owned by somebody else, or it doesn't have a registered keeper. And we would tend to clear waste off our own land. There's some internal machinations around that about which department it's vested in, but that's not really particularly important. If it is somebody else's land, then we've got someone to act against. And some of this waste clearance can be quite significant. So ideally, we don't want to have to do it for nothing. We have a responsibility for our own land, but we don't have a responsibility for third-party land. The difficult one is when there is no registered owner. I think it's 1974, the records changed over with the land registry. Pre-1974, it's quite hard to find ownership from. So some land may not have changed hands because it's been in family ownership for a significant period of time, or it generally just doesn't have an owner. There are parcels of land that don't have any ownership. So that's quite a tricky one for us to decide, do we clear it? And that tends to be based around the public interest and risk matrix. So if it isn't causing a significant risk or isn't in the public interest for us to clear it, we probably won't. And then it goes on about how we enforce against all landowners to remove waste. So I've covered that. And then the enforcement team within the Green Space Action Team, we deal with fly tipping, abandoned vehicles, dangerous dog and dog offences, the waste on private lands I mentioned, and highways and public rights of way work. The abandoned vehicles is quite high. That tends to fluctuate with the price of scrap. If scrap is high, you don't get many abandoned vehicles. If the price of scrap is low, it's much easier to take your car out and burn it out somewhere and claim it was nicked. So that is the breakdown for the team. The same thing again. And then here's an example of this. We'll just quickly flick through that. So, yeah, that's fine. Again, you can read that for yourselves in the paper. But basically, I think the takeaway point from that is that good evidence leads to good prosecutions. Poor evidence doesn't lead to good prosecutions. It leads to probably an unsuccessful investigation. And number of fixed penalty tickets we've issued, again there, that is significantly less than it was last year. You may recall we had a third-party operator in the district last year who were very good at issuing fixed penalties, but were not particularly good at a compassionate approach to it. So at the moment we are looking at how we're going to remodel that street-based enforcement. That piece of work isn't completed yet. So, and that's just a bit about prosecutions. Again, you can read that for yourself. So that is quite an interesting one. So the fly tipping totals within Yorkshire, because none of us, no authority captures it in the same way, then it doesn't actually give you a very clear understanding of, you might say to yourself, well, clearly, actually, Harrogate probably is very clean. Calderdale is incredibly clean, Leeds is incredibly dirty. That isn't necessarily reflective of the truth. It just shows that Leeds is very, very good at capturing data. Calderdale is less good at capturing data. We are okay at capturing data, but not brilliant. So it isn't necessarily reflective of the scale of the issue. So I don't see any of that. So, cool.
Great. Thank you very much. Members? Andrew.
I'm looking at the diagram of just the trends over the last 3 years with incidents. It's quite difficult to sort of understand what's going on over time there, rather than month by month by month. So do you have any indications that changes that you've made or the council's made to the availability of services through environmental recycling centres and opening times, things like that, has impacted on fly tipping or not?
Generally, I'd say no. You would expect that it would, that as you reduce the availability and the type of waste that is acceptable. Generally, no. Our experience is that people who are going to fly tip will fly tip, and the people who are law-abiding will tend to be law-abiding. I think, if anything, what has had an impact potentially is the ban on trade waste on trade vehicles going in, because people who would have collected illegal waste and disposed of it illegally now don't have that as an outlet. So, but we are now capturing more of those doing it. So it's a bit of a swings and roundabouts thing.
If I could, yes, I'll just ask about that. You didn't talk about the heat maps and the clearance. Just wondered what you were trying to draw out of that with the little red spots.
I'll pass to
It was really just all that we were trying to do with regards to both the heat map and the cluster map is to just identify in which areas where we're finding the most fly tipping, really, if you wanted to see it in a geographical way. So the heat map in particular just shows you that, as you'd expect, in town centres is where you seem to be getting the most concentrations, but it's not exactly in the town centres, it's just on the outskirts. So you'd expect that the businesses are normally based in town centres, people are going just outside to fly tip.
How does that inform, if it does at all, your practice or your follow-up or anything?
It doesn't, is the short answer. So it is a reactive service. We don't proactively seek it out. We have a number of areas that we know that are frequently fly tipped. They tend to be rural lay-bys as opposed to urban areas. I think this was just put in just to show that there is a correlation between population density and deposition of waste, to be honest.
Can I have one more? Presumably, given rural lay-bys being a hot spot, and Kirklees having quite a lot of rural areas in the metropolitan zone of sort of Leeds city region, do you think we suffer from cross-border tipping from other local authorities?
Yes. Certainly, when I was more closely involved with it, tyres were a significant issue. You know, the road that goes up past what was Nonsarah's, I don't know if Nonsarah's is still open, but that road, that used to suffer significant fly tipping of tyres. And it was clear that someone was going up there with what I probably consider would be a curtain sider, so a large wagon with curtain sides on it, throwing tyres out, because you'd find them literally on sometimes by the 100. And they just tracked up the road, throwing them out. So, because it's a quiet area, you can come up from Oldham, you can come up from, come across over and then from Barnsley, you can come up from Calderdale, you can come from a whole range of places, yes. And there are a number of sites close to our other borders, I'll be careful how I phrase all of this, that do appear to suffer from cross-border tipping.
I've got Richard and then Martin and then Richard Eastwood. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to ask you about the enforcement. I mean, we didn't have time to go through your example case and whatever, but it's quite clearly an onerous process, I think it's fair to say. Looking at the number of fixed penalty notices that actually served, which was 14 for the whole borough, it's actually, obviously, it'd be quite surprised. Well, I don't know if other councillors here are surprised. This is a relatively low number given the, volume of vociferousness of complaints and so on from the population. And I really take your point. It's about, obviously thinking about the cost. I can tell just reading the procedure, this must be incredibly costly for each case in terms of, and I'm sure the fines, that actually the value of the fines is exceeded by the cost of enforcement, probably looking at some of them. But anyway, I just wanted to ask, in terms of good evidence, can residents make anonymous kind of complaints? And secondly, is there a hotline in place that people can report things? I just wondered if that might help, perhaps.
In terms of a hotline, we don't, but there are numerous ways to report it into the council. You can do it online, you can phone us up, you can do it via KD, and so on. So, and the police also refer it through to us. So people phone 101, that will then get referred through to us. It is a straight offence to fly tip, and the way it was explained to me by a chief seeper once, it's I see you do. And we have an adversarial court system which does require the witness not to be anonymous. If you wish to be a witness, you need to be a witness. Which is one of the reasons why we have not a huge number, because it gets down to a certain stage and people are unwilling to go to court. And I can absolutely understand that. It's a very intimidating process. We do provide support around it. We work with witnesses to kind of help them through the process. But ultimately, if you've seen your next door neighbour chuck something over their back fence, you have to live with the consequences if you go to court. And we absolutely appreciate that. So a lot of the offences that we deal with get captured on CCTV, or people report number plates to us, and then we go through a process. And the formal interview of the person who is alleged to have committed the offence that's when you kind of get an opportunity to place questions to them, for them to have their opportunity to answer the allegations. And sometimes the evidence is so compelling that they will actually admit the offence. And at that point, then the witness doesn't have to go to court, because you have somebody who has admitted the offence.
Yeah, thanks. On the issue of fixed penalty notices, and we mentioned the varying scale of repayment, do we have any data on actual collection? Because often we can issue fines, but they get collected. You mentioned that one group, I think you referred to them as opportunist fly tippers. I think that it's more organised crime. If people are going out and taking money off people with the intent that they are then going to dump that somewhere, that's, I think, what legally is called an acquisitive crime, for which the Proceeds of Crime Act and everything kicks in for. These are not just somebody who's driving down the road and thinks, I can't be bothered going to the tip. They've set out with the intent of taking money off someone and profiting from it. So I'll probably take a difference in term, probably a bit stronger, Rob. Now, and conscious of your definitions of fly tipping and littering. I don't know if we're going to come back to littering at some point during the year because, I mean, you mentioned the private contractor. I think they were dealing more with littering, weren't they? Because I remember in terms of reporting under littering, we previously had a senior Kirklees officer who famously once got himself in the Huddersfield Examiner for reporting someone for throwing a cigarette butt out of the car. The public comments on that were quite mixed. It was littering. The person was fined. And then they complained that Kirklees should have better things to do than prosecute somebody for littering. And, I mean, I actually congratulated the officer at the time because I was lead service. Have we got anything on fly tipping then, which is larger scale, do we take any prosecution or action against squatters or trespassers on land who are fly tipping at the same time? We've had a number of instances of that both in my ward, Bradley, and elsewhere. Picking up on Richard's point, the public's, in terms of the flow chart, if there was an online form for people to fill in, whether it went to prosecute, it may allow collation of evidence because we could get several evidence forms leading it up to one result, I think. Because sometimes, again, particularly with littering, I don't know whether it would apply as much with fly tipping, the mere service of the notice, as in the case I cited, where your car was seen, the driver throwing a cigarette butt, the guy put their hand up, went, yeah, I'll take my fine. Not all of them end up in court, so it's probably worth, if we can collate, and particularly if there's intelligence at vehicles, then that allows an intelligence-led approach to it, working with the police. But I think overall, it's interesting when you look at the incidents and investigations, they all seem to roughly follow a similar track, don't they? We occasionally have spikes. We've got a plateau there about 400, haven't we, where it's ticking along as an average. It's about 300 or 400, so it's interesting to note. And yeah, drilling down on I suppose for us all as ward members, drilling down on the heat maps and things like that will be interesting if that can be done online and looked at that. Can you report online?
Comments?
Well, I asked if we could report online for the collation.
Yeah.
One of the first points I made was a question. What's the ratio of issuing fines to collection? I thought I asked.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Thanks, Martin.
Apologies, Councillor, I got lost somewhere in the I do try my best. Right. Yes, we can get you some collated figures in terms of collection versus fines issued. Again, just for clarity, if it goes to court, we do not get the fine. So for a fixed penalty, we receive the income from that. If it goes to court and the court issues a fine, then the Crown gets the fine. We can apply for costs, so we tend to apply for full costs, which covers the investigation time, it covers legal services time, it covers all of that type of thing. And it's the court's discretion how much they will actually give us back. We tend to get full costs, but not always. So just for clarity on that. In terms of the online form, people can report online. What you can't do is you can't give a witness statement online. We actually need to go and take a witness statement, or somebody needs to provide that because it needs to be signed and countersigned. And it's generally better if the officer takes it, because then they certainly don't direct how a witness would provide their statement, but they can try and pull out any pertinent details to assist in the statement taking. So.
Thank you. Probably got another 8 or 9 minutes, then we need to move on to the next one. So I've got Richard and Yusra so far. Okay. All right, Richard and then Yusra.
Okay, 3 questions again. First of all, concerning the statement about being GAT enforcing against all landowners. It's just I'm assuming that the level of enforcement will be the same regardless of size of landowner. We have instances in our ward where very large landowners don't seem to be clearing up very quickly. If an enforcement order is given to a private landowner, how long are they given to clear it? And forgot what the last one was there. Oh yeah, it looks as though fly tipping incidents have gone up, and it begs the question whether or not the new regime is actually working, and whether or not it's under review in any way, shape or form. Thank you.
Okay, it's a memory test for me. This is absolutely awful. Can you just so the first question was enforcement. Yeah. So what? Oh, sorry. Yeah, no. It's irrespective of size of landowners. So we go against everybody from a small garden to a large scale landowner. Yeah, and private landlords and so on. So any private landowner who has got waste on land that forms a detriment to a local amenity, we would deal with that. And then how long? There is a defined process. So they get written to. They're given, I think it's 14 days. If they don't respond in that time, then it should be a notice, which is 21 days. If they don't respond after that, then we can go and clear the waste in default. We would then issue them a fixed penalty. I think it's 28 days to pay the fixed penalty. If you wish, I can send you the flow chart, which you can have for the minutes. If they don't pay the fixed penalty, then it moves to prosecution. So there is a very defined. It's the Community Protection Notice on the Antisocial Behaviour and Policing Act 2014 that we do that underneath.
And then have flight tipping incidents gone up recently? And
I don't believe so. As I say, I think that we are possibly getting better at capturing the data, like I mentioned earlier on, but we don't overall see a significant increase in fly tipping. And by significant, I don't mean it hasn't gone up by thousands and thousands. There's always some fluctuation and variability within data. But I don't know there's anything that you would regard as statistically noticeable.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, and a personal thank you to all the frontline staff for doing all the hard work. It must be a big task with all the wards you've got to manage. I've just got a very simple question in terms of preventative measures. I know in Batley West Ward we have a lot of regular fly tipping areas. They might be small, they might be quite large. We were just having a discussion with some of the staff members the other day about how we could address that and whether you'd looked at signage. I know that might not necessarily prevent someone from fly tipping, but signage in itself may be a pre-warner for people not to do that. I'm just wondering whether that was something you could consider, with it being more cost effective compared to having someone enforce it.
We do provide signage. In the past, we put a lot of signs up saying, no fly tipping or whatever. My view is that signs tend to work for people who read signs. If people are intent on nefarious acts, they will generally do that if signage is present or not. But we can certainly look. I mean, we have relatively cheap correct signs that we put up. The officers should have told you about those. Hopefully they did. And we can put them on regular high, fly tipping hotspots. If it may deter some people potentially.
all right, I've got Martin. It's going to be a very quick question because I want to get one in. So no more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, just previously in council it was said that we had covert cameras. I think it was referred to as we had CCTV cameras in Coke cans. You're shaking your head. I was going to ask about that, but obviously the former leader of the council was mistaken when we said we had them.
So we do not have covert cameras. Covert cameras would require us to go through RIPA authorisation. RIPA authorisation now requires a magistrate consent. We may use overt cameras, so the use of CCTV is clearly visible and is obvious. That doesn't mean the cameras may not be, but there'll certainly be signage up telling you that CCTV is operating in that area.
Okay, Rob, just a quick one from me. In my ward, we've got hotspots, and I know there'll be different hotspots in different areas. And obviously, you showed the heat maps. At the moment, you're saying that you can't really use the information from that because you're being quite reactive. I'd just be interested to know what we could potentially do in terms of being more intelligence-led. I know capacity is obviously an issue. But for me, I know this particular bits, and you'll be aware of this as well, where we get constant fly tipping and it doesn't feel like it's getting any better at all. So what intelligence-led approaches or intensive approaches could we use where we know it's happening a lot?
So I think, again, it's important to understand what we can actually do. So if we can't identify the person, and quite often if it's in the more urban areas, there are people who are carrying their waste to those places, then the chance of identifying that person is quite small. So we already do sort of community-based information sharing, saying actually don't do this, sort of comm stuff, explaining to people the offence itself, explaining what the consequences are, and also giving all the information we possibly can about how you can legitimately dispose of your waste. Again, if we become aware of particular sort of operations working on particular estates or in particular areas, going around with open or closed transit bans, whatever it might be, or that kind of operation. Again, we work with K&H, we advise them to tell their tenants, and we'll work, if it's not a K&H estate, we'll work with sort of other people to advise them that this is the correct way of doing it. Don't give your waste to an unlicensed waste carrier. If you do give your waste to a third party, keep a note of the vehicle registration number. If you can, ask to see their waste carrier's licence. If they're a legitimate waste carrier, they will have no concerns about showing it to you. There are licences for guys who go and collect scrap as well, so ask to see those. So we do some proactive information sharing. In terms of targeted intervention, you're right, it is about capacity. They are very busy, they deal with a whole range of offences, and to be able to focus right down on particular areas for a protracted period of time, we just don't have the time to do it, unfortunately.
Thanks for that, Rob. I think it's probably an area we need to probably continually review. Absolutely take on board issues with capacity, such as just something that's frustrating for everybody, isn't it, as well as team members. But thank you very much. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to get your tea and coffee or whatever, and then we're going to move on to the household waste recycling centres. Okay, so 2 minutes if you just want a bit of a breather. Thank you. Right, thank you, members. We're going to move on to household waste recycling centres. And we've got the lovely Laurie Hunter here. She's going to get us started off, and then we'll go into questions. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to present. So we've essentially got 5 household waste sites across the district. Geographically, we've tried to spread them out so that there's a reasonable access to any household waste site depending on where you live within the district. Obviously, there's a website which provides all the information of the sorts of materials that can go into the household waste site, which is a larger amount of recycling than you get at your curbside collection service. So the idea is that you can recycle more at the household waste sites, and that's what we try to promote, whilst you can bring in general waste as well. So essentially, it's for Kirklees household users. They were never really designed for trade businesses, although trade businesses do have some options for waste management. They can request a trade waste collection service via bins or skips, or they can go to the waste transfer station, which is managed by Suez over in Dewsbury, so that's an option. Or they can use waste management companies, so there's plenty of other options that Kirklees businesses can undertake. We have got Suez who are contracted to manage our 5 household waste sites. The sites are relatively small. They were built, I think they're historical, but Suez have been managing them since around 1999, I think, which is when we started the contract. They're small. They can easily become quite busy on weekends, so Suez need to try and manage that turnaround of residents at the household waste sites. We've implemented a permit system from around, I believe it was 1st of July 2016, with a very soft start beforehand. So I'll get onto that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But essentially, in order to help manage the sites and to ensure that residents get full use of it, we've managed very large commercial type vehicles off the site as part of the permit process. So, as I've said, 2016, around the summer, it was launched with a soft start, and I think it was early May when we started to introduce it and hand out leaflets to household waste site visitors and answered as many questions as we could in advance. The application process is relatively quick and easy. From, I think, 2018, we've tagged it on the back of the My Kirklees account, so you need a My Kirklees account to get a permit, and that just helps us ensure that Kirklees residents can apply. There's obviously anyone who isn't au fait with computers, there's obviously lots of other support mechanisms in place. You can use Kirklees Direct, customer service centres, and local libraries where you can get some help getting a permit for your household. And anyone who has any family living outside of the district, so if Mrs. Miggins lives in Murfield, let's say, but her daughter lives in Calderdale, her daughter's helping her clean up her house, there's some flexibility in the system so that her daughter can visit a Kirklees household waste site. So there's plenty of flexibility to support residents to get rid of their waste. I've put a specific slide on soil and rubble because it continues to be something that's asked amongst residents even after 2 years. So we've got an inert material that's categorised by DEFRA as commercial industrial waste. Now I've put that in there because that defines how we use our household waste sites. So I've described how household waste sites are for householders and not for commercial businesses. It creates that focus so that householders take priority. What we've seen over the years, which is why we've put the permits in place, is that the sites were being used by trade businesses, and perhaps we needed to manage that a little bit more closely, and that took the focus away from residents. We're trying to bring that back in a bit, which is why we've introduced permits. So we've got the soil and rubble container. We thought we'd introduce a more convenient service by offering a service at the curbside rather than from the household waste sites. It allowed us to categorically determine that it is from the household itself, and it allowed us to manage kind of smaller DIY type amounts that would allow to the resident doing things themselves rather than getting a builder in and reducing the cost to be able to dispose of the material yourself. If you have a trader in your household, that material that they've gotten rid of is technically trade waste. It isn't household waste anymore, unless you're doing it yourself. And that's just sort of a little bit of information around the way the law works at this point in time. And that just demonstrates my point with regards to how much it's increased by. So back in 2002-03, that will have been when we first started collecting data on soil and rubble. We had about 8,500 tonnes. That increased to 11,000 by 15-16, which is when we removed the containers. This is data from our bulky waste collection service. So the soil and rubble container was removed around on the 1st of November 2016, and you can see bulky waste collection requests have increased since then, and it's fluctuated. Looks like around the summertime is when we get the peak in requests, probably when people are doing their gardens or doing a bit of DIY at home. So we have shown an increase in the service via soil and rubble. So I've just pulled together some performance figures for us to discuss, should you wish. So in 15-16 we had, which was before we put in the permits, we had just under 55,000 tonnes per annum across all 5 of our household waste sites. Once we've put in the permit system and removed the soil and rubble containers, that reduced to just over 35,000 tonnes per annum. So almost 20,000 tonne reduction with regards to there'll be lots of seasonal variation with regards to why it's reduced, but between those 2 years, almost a 20,000 year reduction. Just to provide an indication on cost, if our energy from waste facility is full or at capacity, landfill tax at this point in time is £91.35. With regards to complaints, we have seen increases since implementation of our changes in 2016. These have been primarily around removal of soil and rubble containers, and I think at full council in January this year, we announced that national government have published their resources and waste strategy. As a reflection of that, and as a reflection of our performance levels at the moment, we've said we start to work on a Kirklees recycling and waste strategy. I see no reason why we couldn't consider household waste sites as part of that documentation. And I think that's it. It's relatively short slides on household waste sites.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Just looking at the tonnages. That's the gross tonnage going into the sites, made up of different categories, presumably. So some of that is green waste, some of that is bulky material, some of it is metal, some of it is paper, so on and so forth. Do you have any split down of that in terms of what is actually recyclable as opposed to ending up as landfill? Because you put an indicative cost down here, but not all of it goes to landfill, does it? Absolutely not. You're absolutely right. And I mean, I think, as I understand it, the council gets credit for the metals that get recycled, and I've never seen any information distributed or publicised about the value of that to the council, if it's got a value, because that's one of the things. If you leave a piece of metal outside your front door, the roving scrap man will take it away and take the credit. It's just sort of giving people an incentive to take it to the tip rather than leave it outside and encourage nefarious people to pick it up and take it somewhere else. So it just doesn't feel like you're really explaining what's going on here, because it's just giving us gross tonnages through the door rather than how it then ends up. Obviously, some of it's burnt, some of it goes to landfill, some of it gets recycled. And it feels like you can do a lot more to encourage people to understand the benefit of taking stuff there, and the value it creates in environmental terms. Because I guess all the green material is composted. I don't know that. I'm assuming that.
So with regards to value of materials, Kirklees Council don't get the value. It's all wrapped up in the contract with Suez. So the contractor will get the value. We simply have a gate fee for all materials that Suez process on our behalf. So if there's any value to be had, it's the contractor. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't split those numbers down for you, absolutely. So we could, I don't know if we could split it between what goes in the energy from waste facility and what gets landfilled, but we can certainly break each of those years between 15-16 and 18-19 with regards to what proportion is recycled and what proportion is general waste.
In some senses, knowing how much of it is normal household waste would give some indication of the dissatisfaction or inadequacy of the roadside collection. Knowing how much of it was recyclable would give some sense of the environmental awareness of the community. So I just don't understand what's going on here, because there are lots of signals in this, but they're all sort of blended together as a gross tonnage, and we can't really understand it.
Yeah, we can certainly.
So I think that would be useful, because I don't think we can do any scrutiny of this, because it just tells you how many cars drive through the door and throw their stuff in the various bins.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. That's no problem.
Any questions from members?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, that there's a lot of this is going to be defined by the contract with sewage, pretty much. But there's obviously the whole issue of waste raises other kind of social and environmental issues of all sorts. And previously on this committee, we have actually discussed kind of how something like this could potentially fit with the local wealth building and community wealth building policy, which is part of the Kirklees economic strategy, and raised ideas around recycling, reuse in terms of community businesses. So I don't know if there's any thoughts about or anything's happened really in terms of developing that, because obviously the more that we can recycle and reuse, and it is shocking, isn't it, when you go to these centres, you see all these piles of things that actually are perfectly good, really, and it's hard to understand why they're there often. So I just wanted to ask about the social and environmental issues, and also in terms of the environmental one. I mean, I don't know, has any calculation been done around the, in terms of the kind of carbon budget, the carbon emissions associated with this activity, really? So yeah, those are my questions.
So the social, I will call it social improvement question, I suppose. There's nothing stopping us from doing something now with regards to social improvement and getting residents a little bit more involved. So at the moment we're running, it's a little bit slightly different, but we're working on waste minimisation, Love Food, Save More workshops for communities. So it's about inviting residents to come to a workshop. It's a little bit more than a cooking class, but it's about kind of minimising your bill, but minimising the amount of waste you produce as well. We could explore working a little bit more with social enterprise, working a little bit more with charity shops. On our bulky waste website, the first thing you see isn't, here's how you dispose of your bulky waste, it's actually, have you thought about donating? So we've got actually recycling options first. We've even got, do you want to make some money out of it, and can you put it on eBay? And then at the bottom is where you then get to bulky waste. So we do try to encourage residents to ring up all the various charities that will even collect from the household before they collect bulky waste. On the carbon footprint, it's a really good question, and I think as part of the Kirklees strategy, we do need to look at what's called a strategic environmental assessment before deciding what options you're undertaking. It's just doing that environmental assessment to ensure not just carbon, but what the emissions are from various sources, and that would include the whole system cost from receiving the material, reprocessing it, transport costs. Everything's taken into account when you complete an SCA.
On that recycling topic, have you investigated or thought about the idea of, and I've seen this in other local authorities, on-site, what they call sort of skip shops, where people they drive into the one location, and as they load the back of the car, that they are encouraged to think, well, could somebody else sell this? And so there's a place you can go and leave the old bikes or bits of furniture that you're about to throw away, because they could be upcycled by somebody else. And so there's an active trading activity going on in a separate facility, which is sort of run semi-commercially. I mean, have you considered that? Or
We've got, we're exploring a model that Leeds is using at the moment. There are 2 reuse shops which Leeds has, and we're just looking and understanding what the implementation of that would be. So yes, there are things that we're exploring. So the way it works in Leeds is you tie together the household waste sites with a reuse shop. So you capture their attention as they're going in, and rather than go up to the tip, they turn right to go into the reuse shop first. There's a counter where people can say, could you use any of this stuff? And there's someone sorting it through, and whatever's left, they then take up to the household waste site. So there are models like that that work across household waste sites. They're very much tied with linked disposals, that you're capturing it and drawing it away. That's something that we can look to explore within Kirklees.
Hi. I was just about to say the very same thing on one of the points, because I know in Leeds it works very well. My only other point was what kind of, at any of the sites, is there capacity to increase capacity so that the flow of traffic at busy times can be quicker? I know I was down at Emerald Street just this last weekend, and it was quite chaotic, shall we say, at the point of where you're able to tip your stuff into the skips. Cars were parked either side, and it was quite dangerous, to be honest, for those who were in the process of uploading. So just wondering if there's any way that we can increase capacity and reduce that element of danger for people as they're emptying their vehicles.
I mean, our existing sites should manage health and safety, so we should have staff there. If there are traffic issues, SUEZ staff should be managing that. So if there are any particular issues that you want me to look at in detail, please let me know and I'll feed that back to SUEZ. We meet them monthly. We've got a very proactive relationship with them to ensure the household waste sites are managed properly. With regards to kind of overall improvements, that's exactly the sort of thing that we would put in the recycling and waste strategy. If there is a view that we need to improve the way they're laid out, for example, or what materials are collected, that's certainly something that we can look at as part of the wider strategy for Kirklees.
I've got a memory from last year that the incinerator contract is coming up sometime or other fairly soon. Is that part of the same contract relationship? Because presumably some of this is thinking about what you're going to do next, because we've had this historical relationship with SUEZ for these services. How are you developing a sort of a more strategic viewpoint on this for the future?
So that's part of why we need to develop a new Kirklees strategy. We need to understand what our vision is. The contract comes to an end in 2023 with an option to extend for up to a further 5 years after that point, should we wish to do so. This is why the beauty of the national strategy is really timely for us, because it helps us to start to plan a new contract or a new something else after 2023.
Okay, I just wanted to ask one thing, Laura. This is something that comes up a lot with residents. It's the household waste recycling centres, and there might be some issues around communication. Although we do have a permit in place, a lot of people seem to be put off by the permit itself, although, you know, having gone through the process myself, it's pretty quick and easy to do. So I don't know if there's something we do need to do about communication, about accessing the sites. And the other thing that comes up a lot is if as a resident you have a larger size vehicle, sometimes they're saying they have trouble accessing the sites. I've heard that from a couple of residents. And again, that might be just having to clear up information around that. And then the other big thing that comes up is the fact that because it isn't open for trade waste, actually all we're doing is allowing, we're creating the conditions for there to be more fly tipping taking place because of that. And it'd just be interesting to get your view on those points.
Okay, so firstly on communications, you're probably right. We could do with improving communications on household waste sites to make things a bit easier for residents and to just point them in the right direction. There's nothing wrong with that, and certainly take that back. With regards to larger vehicles, this was again to manage trade waste. There's probably something in that with regards to providing more outlets. I mean, we have the transfer station at the moment. We've got 5 household waste sites. We have a trade waste collection service. Maybe we can promote our trade waste collection service a little bit better, make it a little bit more attractive. We probably haven't refreshed that in a little while. So does that need to fall into the new strategy as well, potentially? Larger vehicles does take a little bit longer because it requires an approval process. So on the permit system, we do need assurance that it is actually a larger vehicle and not a vehicle that we don't allow on sites. So there's a checking process that does take a little bit longer.
And on the trade waste issue, lots of people feel that because they can't necessarily access that.
It's a council decision, I suppose. At the moment, the priority is for householders. On weekends, it is already quite busy. If you did want trade waste allowed as well, how would that formulate? Again, I don't think it's beyond the realms of exploring as part of the new strategy.
Yeah. Great. I'd love to see that explored, so I'll put that in there. Okay, so if we move on, if that's okay, members, we'll move on to bulky waste collection, and then we've got to just go through the work programme a little bit, and we need to try and finish at 4, so just bear that in mind, everybody. Okay, Laura, if you want to move on to...
There's not a huge amount on bulky waste in the slides, I don't think, just a few. So essentially it's in 2016 again, I think this was... Sorry, in 2016 again, this was one of the changes that we've implemented in bulky waste. So we went from we introduced a chargeable system, and that's brought us in line with other local authorities in West Yorkshire. All of them charge at the moment, all relatively the same. They're all relatively comparable, but that online booking system allowed us to just manage that service a little bit better. So there's a very easy, convenient online system, and as with the household waste site permits, that support is available for anyone who isn't IT savvy to use Kirklees Direct libraries and customer service offices. Again, the website encourages charity donations, so it always leads people to see if they can reuse their materials instead. With regards to supporting our most vulnerable residents, we've got some residents who are on assisted bin collection service, and these are residents with mobility issues. We allow them to have 2 free bulky waste collection services within a year, and for Kirklees passport holders, we offer a 50% discount just to manage that cost a little bit better. At the moment, we've got £5.20 per item or bag and £20.80 for white goods. And again, I've just checked this morning and it seems comparable with other West Yorkshire authorities. Usually, we collect within 2 to 4 weeks from when you put it on the system. Now, in busy periods, that can increase slightly, and we do try to keep our website up to date just to notify residents before they book of the timescales at that particular point in time. Again, how we deliver the bulky waste collection service is beyond the realms of possibility for us to sort of include something within that analysis. This is just providing you with the overall number of collections between from 2016 onwards and beforehand. What's interesting is in 2016 we have more bookings than before when it was free. You'd think it would be the opposite. It then dropped again, I suppose, from 17, 18 and 19, but I always find that statistic quite interesting in 2016. If we focus on just 2018-19, you'd normally think around the summer the bulky waste collection service would be busiest, but it just seems to even out across the different months with an interesting spike in August. Again, just a couple of heat maps, and it's really just aligning very much like the fly tipping slides with where population exists. So there's a correlation between population and bulky waste collection services. And that's just a count of how many in each area. And that's it, essentially.
Thank you. Any questions? Richard,
Hi. A couple of things. First of all, everything's aimed at online again. So what help is available to residents who are not confident using online facilities or even don't have them? And the other thing is, it's a point I wasn't aware of myself here. It says here that for residents with an assisted bin collection, they're entitled to 2 free collections in a year.
Yeah.
Then how well is that advertised and promoted to residents who do have assisted bin collections? It would be helpful, obviously, to them if they were aware of that. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably not very well advertised at the moment, but there's nothing saying that we couldn't do that at this point in time. With regards to advertising it, I think we do advertise the bulky waste collection service, but again, there's probably a little bit more we can do along that with regards to how we promote it.
Sorry, I do have one more. Sorry, we forgot. Yeah, it's the 2 to 4 week turnaround on picking up. I mean, we've had an instance recently where it's 8 weeks for a collection of either a cooker or a fridge, I forget which. And obviously the money was taken from the resident at the point of booking, as far as I'm aware. So what annoyed this particular resident is that it's just taking time and time and time, and it's still there. So how can we guarantee that it doesn't go on beyond the 2 to 4 weeks? I know you're saying in the summer it might be longer, but what sort of in-house maintenance on it to make sure that collections are made in a timely manner?
And I think that's exactly why it needs to be reviewed as part of the overall strategy. So I think what we have at the moment is that we don't have dedicated resources just to the bulky waste collection service. We could do with reviewing that just to ensure that we can provide that more timely service. If you've got a dedicated vehicles and dedicated people to deliver, then you can then keep to certain timescales. So we could certainly review that.
Can I just ask a quick question, Laurie? I think I tried this last year as well. You're probably not a fan of it, but I think the point Richard made about the delays is a good one. Obviously, capacity is quite clearly an issue, and that's something that you're looking at in terms of your review, which is excellent. I've mentioned before about, could there be an option where at least once a year we provide a universal sort of free collection? So my sister lives in Sydney, and I'm sure it happens in other parts in this country as well, but I know when I went to visit her last time, they offer like a free curbside collection where once a year or twice a year you can just basically leave your more bulkier items on the side of your house on the road, and then they'll come and collect it for free. And I was just wondering if that would be even something that we would perhaps consider at all.
We can consider a version of that in the strategy. I think if you picked an amnesty day, everyone would be bringing out all sorts, and you'd end up with streets full of litter. We've tried it before, and we were just talking about it earlier with regards to, we have in the past offered to some communities, we'll put a skip in this particular place on your street, and on this day, please bring out what you want to dispose of. And we've ended up with an absolute waste mountain, which is essentially, it's illegal. We can't have uncontained waste like that. We do need to be able to manage it. So if we offered something like that, we need to ensure that we've got the resources to deliver it.
I think that's a very fair point. I just think it's useful for us to have a think about. Obviously, we've got restraints that perhaps Sydney City Council don't have at the moment, but that's just different approaches for us to consider. Thank you very much, Laurie. Really appreciate all the time that you've given us, and I know you had to put this report together very quickly, so we very much appreciate that. Any more questions for Laurie before she goes? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Laurie. Appreciate that. So we're just going to move to the work programme quickly, and then we can end after that. Did you want to say anything on that, Sheila?
You've
Sorry.
So you'll be aware that Councillor Bolt sent an email round suggesting that we have a study visit of the cycling walking framework. So we're looking at that, getting some maps. I'll send some maps out for members, and if you let me know if you will be interested on going on that. And then for the next meeting, we're looking at an informal meeting about the Huddersfield blueprint, just to see how people feel that the consultation's gone for them. So I'll be getting in touch with you about a date for that. Looking at an evening session for that, so that people will be able to attend. So I'll email you about that soon. And then in October, we've got various housing issues and the air quality action plan coming forward.
Yeah. Okay, and we've put housing back in because I know a couple of members wanted that, rather than being a lead monitoring issue, you wanted it at the panel. So we'll cover homelessness and rough sleeping. We'll ask for an update on that. Richard, I know you asked for a session around the relationship with K&H, and we're looking to do that a little bit later on, perhaps in December, when they're going to have, officers will have a little bit more information on that. Just on the cycling and walking framework as well, one of the things we're looking at is perhaps doing a joint session with the health and care panel, which would be appropriate given that there's public health and infrastructure issues that we need to take into account. But we do need oversight from Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee on that. So we'll see what they've got to say that, and if they give us sign off, we'll look to do that at the beginning of next year, sort of January, February. So we're taking in public health issues as well as on infrastructure as well. Is that all right? And we'll keep you updated on the study visit and the potential sort of informal workshop session that we do on town centres. Is that okay? Yeah. Any other questions? No? We're going to go enjoy the sunshine. Yeah? All right then. Thank you everybody for your time. Thanks.